This video is on equations with brackets, and it's the first of two videos that we'll be making on equations with brackets. So when you have an equation with brackets, what you need to know is you have to expand the brackets first. And if you've forgotten what expanding means, it's where we have a term out the front of a set of brackets, and sometimes you'll have a number. So in these examples, I've put a number out the front of the bracket. Sometimes you might have a pronumeral, and then you'll have some terms inside the bracket. And to expand the bracket, it means to multiply the term outside the bracket by all the terms inside the bracket. So multiplication is the operation you'll be carrying out. So if I look at this example here, I've got 3 and it's joined to the brackets through multiplication. So I'm going to do 3 times e, which is 3e, and 3 times positive 2, which is positive 6. You must remember the operation or the sign of the second term. Here I've got 3 times e minus 2. So I'm going to do 3 times e, which is 3e. But this time around I've got 3 times a negative 2. So this positive 3 and this negative 2 will result when I multiply in a negative number, because when you're multiplying, if the signs are different, you will end up with a negative. And if the signs are the same, so a positive and a positive or a negative and a negative, you will end up with a positive. So you'll need to remember that. Last example, we've got a negative 3 out the front. So when I multiply negative 3 by e, that will give me negative 3e. And negative 3 multiplied by negative 2, here we have 2 negatives, so that will result in positive 6. So we will need to remember how to expand brackets in order to do these kinds of questions. So let's have a look at the first equation. I've written the equation twice because there's 2 different methods you can use to solve equations with brackets. And I need you to sort of think about, well, which method do I like better and when is it best to use one method over the other? So like I said before, one method you could use is you could expand the brackets. So when I expand these brackets, we've done it many times now, we get 3e minus 6 equals 21. And then this looks like a 2-step equation. So I will always move whatever's attached to the pronumeral, that has to go last. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. Minus 6 plus 6 gives me 0, so I'll get 3e equals 27, and then I will divide by 3 because I'm doing the opposite of multiplying by 3, and that gives me e equals 9. So that's one method, expand the brackets, and then it turns into a nice 2-step equation which hopefully you can solve. Now the other method is to understand the fact that this 3 is joined to the bracket by multiplication. So if I wanted to, instead of multiplying by 3, I could divide by 3 on both sides. And when I divide by 3, what will happen is this 3 in the numerator will cancel with this 3 in the denominator. So 3 divided by 3, that really leaves me with a 1, but I definitely will not be writing it like that. Okay, what I need you to understand is there is a 1, but I really don't need to write it in. All I'm left with is just the e minus 2, because e minus 2 multiplied by 1 is just e minus 2. So we get e minus 2 on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, I get 21 divided by 3, which is 7, and then I can add 2 to both sides, which gives me, well, these will cancel, minus 2 plus 2 is 0, so I'll get e equals 7 plus 2, which is 9. So same equation, I should get the same answer. I actually think I prefer method 2 because with method 2 I don't even have to expand the brackets. And the reason why method 2 works so well is because the 3 on this side goes very nicely into the 21. So I feel like this method 2 is a really good method when this number, this number over here, if that number divides very nicely into that, I would probably divide it straight away instead of expanding the brackets. All right, let's have a look again and decide, well, would you do method 1 or would you do method 2? So method 1 will require me to expand the brackets, multiply. So we're going to do 4 times a, which is 4a, and 4 times 5, which is positive 20. And then I'm going to subtract 20 from both sides. And the 20 minus 20 will give me 0, so I'm left with 4a equals 11 minus 20 is negative 9. And then I will divide both sides by 4, giving me negative 9 over 4. Now, if I do method 2, that's where I move the 4 first, so I don't expand the brackets. Method 2 is we don't expand the brackets, we just divide both sides by 4. And when I divide by 4, the 4 divided by 4 will give me 1, so I'm left with one lot of a plus 5, which is just a plus 5. And then I'm left with 11 on 4. Now, there's a couple of different ways of writing 11 on 4. 11 on 4 is the same as 2 3/4, and it's also the same as 2.75, so it doesn't really matter. You just choose whichever form suits you best. I might choose the 2.75. And now I'm going to move the plus 5 by minusing 5 on both sides. And that will give me, well, what's 2.75 minus 5? You could use a calculator if you need to, or hopefully if your skills are okay, you would know that was minus 2.25. Definitely this time around, I think method 2 is a little bit harder, and the reason why it's harder is because 4 doesn't divide nicely into 11. So for some students who struggle with decimals and fractions, then I think this method might be the best way to go. So you really need to know yourself well. I chose to write 2 3/4 as a decimal because I thought that was easiest to compute, but some of you might have written it as a plus 5 equals 2 3/4, and then you could have minus 5 on both sides. It really depends on what your skills are like in terms of arithmetic, but I would hope that they would be quite strong, and you really should in year 8 be able to handle numbers in decimal form as well as fractional form in the mixed number form, or also as an improper fraction. Next video we will look at equations with brackets, but harder than these. So these are the most basic level that you should hopefully be able to handle.